Hi. Just get straight into this. One of the things I dislike most about this pandemic, and we've now hit over 100,000 deaths, at least according to The Guardian. There's obviously different ways of looking at that, but at least 86,000 and by some measures 100,000 deaths. So this is, that's a sobering reality. Um, but one of the things I most dislike about the pandemic, apart from the sacrifices that we made is the fact that there has very clearly been mixed messaging from the government. Now, to be clear, I don't want to be too critical of the government. I know some people, I've seen some Labour people say that they're mass murderers. I think that's absurd. I honestly think whoever was in power it would be a challenge. But Boris has just come out with a post on his page saying if you're thinking about going out this weekend, think twice. And it's that long running mantra, stay at home, save lives. Um, Here's the problem. Boris and his government know full well that there are exemptions allowing people to go out. Um, Two that come to mind, two obvious ones, is buying food and exercise, which he himself has utilised. He was seen cycling earlier this week 7 miles from Downing Street, which is allowed. I don't think that's a scandal because it's within the rules. It's local. But this to me has been one of the biggest problems with the government's response. The messaging has been contradictory. And I frankly think it's time to drop this. They're not going to because it's in all the sloganing. But stay at home, save lives. That's becoming problematic. And this is why it by definition, ignores those very valid exemptions. This isn't trivial things. It's not. Recently, I was having a conversation with a nurse. I was giving blood and I was having a conversation with the nurse. She just wanted to know my thoughts on things. And she came out with something which, in retrospect, I thought was a little bit shocking. She said if she had her way, there would be military on the streets. Now, I do understand NHS personnel being very frustrated with idiots. Um, But I told her I don't think that would work. And, I was quite polite. I think that was an extreme response. Now, maybe she was just fed up with the idiots, so fair enough. But, that's the sort of thing that would never be tolerated in this country. Um, I still veer on the side of we need to take this thing seriously, and therefore the measures that are in place are understandable. But the messaging is a big problem. Every time the government comes out with this thing, this blanket statement, stay at home no matter what, they're contradicting themselves because in small print, oh, and this, it's for essential reasons. This might sound like nitpicking, but I think it's important. Messaging is important. And I think stay at home, save lives. It should be something like take this seriously or follow the guidelines or something like that. But stay at home, save lives. I think it's problematic because it's a contradictory message. It is because you are allowed to leave your house for those reasons, getting food and exercise. And if you're an essential worker, the government knows this. I understand the logic. They want to reduce the number of people going out. It hasn't worked in some cases because you have, people gathering together and you have idiots holding parties and so on. I don't blame the government for that. I think they are just being stubborn and selfish. But I do have a problem with this rhetoric. Um, I'm also thinking about people who are vulnerable. Someone who has anxiety issues. This is a serious point. Someone who has anxiety issues, maybe a vulnerable adult, for example. Um, let's say they live on their own, or let's say they maybe have a carer, but they're a vulnerable person and they're thinking, I need to get food or other essentials, but I'm being told by the government if I go out, I will be criminalized. But that's not the case because they would be allowed to do that, or their carer would be allowed to do that. So why send out this alarmist narrative that doesn't correspond to the reality? It's one of the things I most dislike about this is this constant threatening sort of, or not threatening, but this constant sweeping rhetoric that the government comes out with. I'm not for a second saying it should be watered down. I think the messaging does need to be clear and firm. But this is the problem. I honestly think ever since the Cummings scandal, and Dominic Cummings has kind of become the villain of all of this, but he's not the only one. There's other examples like the Scottish health advisor, and there's others. As soon as senior figures started breaking the rules, as soon as the Mayor of London last year allowed the Black Lives Matter protests, you know, it set a precedent for whataboutery. And I'm not saying that we should take the attitude, oh, they done it, so I'll do it. I think people still have responsibility themselves. But um, here's the thing: most British people have been abiding by these rules. They've worn their masks. They've abided by the social distancing. I'm not against that. I understand the logic of it. And I would certainly understand the perspective of health workers who are very frustrated and they might have even suffered personal abuse. But with the greatest of respect to them, they also need to understand the other side of this, which is that we can't give up liberty forever. We can't. Um, Johnson knows this. And the messaging, I think, it's contradictory. You can't say stay at home, save lives. Oh, but it's okay if you're going out to get food and exercise in small print. Those are important things. So what I would have is messaging that is more accurate, messaging along the lines of take this seriously. COVID is a killer or something like that, because that hits the nail on the head. It's serious messaging, but it's not, frankly, misleading people. I mean, there's no question about it. The government messaging on this has been often contradictory, confusing, and inconsistent. And I know aspects of this has changed as a new strain and so on, but I do think there's a lot of contradictions in the government's messaging. And it's like there's a common sense deficit. I mean, when Boris came out with that, he knows he was on his bicycle a few days ago. So I actually wrote a message, Prime Minister, does this also apply to you? Because it's a contradiction, and people won't easily forget these contradictions.